Okay, so our story for this week is uh, Kate Wilhelm's The Funeral. And I was not familiar with this author. I didn't know that this story was in the same collection that we just celebrated pretty recently.
Well,
Is that
it was in a sequel to that collection.
a sequel?
Harlan Ellison, the cantankerous and one of a kind science fiction writer of the 70s, who was kind of an outgoing Philip K. Dick, and who wrote that wonderful story, I Have No Mouth, But I Must Scream,
Hmm.
that we did, which is, as scary a picture of the future as has ever been written. He edited these anthologies, Dangerous Visions, and this was from Dangerous Visions again, and I think it was that book was published in 1979. I don't know exactly when this story was written.
73, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Now I don't know who Kate Wilhelm is. Who is she? Did you research her at all?
I mean, a little bit. She was a sci-fi writer. She was born in Oregon, and she was, from what I can tell, very productive. And I'm excited about that actually because I really enjoyed this story, and so I'm gonna read some of the others. But this is a story she was apparently very famous for, and it ties into a lot of the things that we talked about today. But do you want to do a quick summary of it, or?
Well, I think you should. It's a very oblique story that doesn't give away its setting, except quite gradually. It isn't overt about what's happening, where it's happening, why it's happening, when it's happening. You have to kind of accumulate and put together clues about where this girl, who is the main character, is actually residing, and in what kind of world.
Yeah, so we can infer that it's some kind of future society. And it's funny that you said that it's inexact, because the way it starts is no one could say exactly how old Madame Westphal was when she finally died. At least 120, it was estimated. So the story is built around the death of this woman, Madame Westphal, who was an instructor of young girls whose future destinies have not yet been determined, but many of them will go on to be teachers. Some of them aspire to become ladies, which is there's sort of their code in the story for people who mate and have families and all those things.
Right.
But the rest of them are going to do some kind of other service, and
right. Nurses and so on.
Nurses and so on, consider traditional female roles, right? And these young girls dress in black, very plainly, and they're very severely treated by their instructors. But one of their instructors, a Madame Westphal, has died, and her body is laid out, and there are these graphic descriptions about how sort of gross her body looks and how papery and leathery her skin is. And the main character is this girl named Carla, and she's told there's going to be a period that apparently this Madame Westphal was a great figure in the society, so they're going to.
Yeah, and I think they're all in a school, are they not?
They're in a school, yeah.
Yeah.
And so the body is laid out for viewing, but it's eventually going to be moved to her ancestral home in, of all places, Scranton, Pennsylvania. And this other teacher, coincidentally named Madame Trudeau, comes up to Carla and says, "Listen, I've got a little project for you. You were one of her students, right, Madame Westphal? I want you to sit down and write down everything that Madame Westphal might have said over the years that you can remember. And for the first time ever, she's given a pen and paper. And then this gives us some clues into the nature of the society, that it's extremely restrictive. Um, it's an assault on a lot of things that we've talked about before, like that they're really not that big into memory in this society.
No, education involves interacting with these machines, these kind of touch
The
screen
learning
machines.
machines. Mhm.
And it's sort of startling in the story when she is given a piece of paper and all she can do is sort of compulsively write her name, because she's never had the freedom of a medium that she can keep, that she can own. When you write in this society, it goes into an electronic, vortex. You can't keep anything for yourself. And just that detail struck me as brilliant. I realized how far we are down that road already. To have most of the product of our minds and our writing and our drawing and thought. Yeah, you could maybe store it and print it out someday, but mostly it just disappears. It just goes down the drain. I'm sitting here in my dad's old cabin here. He was born in 1938, and every notebook, every idea he ever had, he had to write down. There wasn't some computer. There's no disk somewhere. There's no cloud somewhere. I'm surrounded by everything the guy ever thought, pretty much, on a legal pad.
But
The idea of the idea of just
society. Yeah.
What's that?
Not in our society. It just goes out into the vapor.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Vaporizes.
That's really interesting. Yeah, but that was a time, and this is sort of a classic Fahrenheit 451 theme, which is, you're not encouraged to remember what's going on, or remember, or to try to square things that happened weeks ago with things that happen today, because what matters is the instruction that you're getting right now and your future, and what's going to happen in the future. And this girl Carla, she's so totally unself-aware that she doesn't realize that she doesn't have a last name until she starts doing this project, which is striking. Now it comes out during this moment that she wanted to be a lady, that she had designs on becoming a lady, and her instructor, this new instructor, this Madame Trudeau, is beside herself with laughter and bemusement at the idea that this plain Carla could ever have been a lady. And then they show her what ladies really are, and there's like a picture of a lady who's got long blonde hair and is wearing this beautiful dress and looks very elegant, but they take the wig off and it's short hair. Her face up close turns out to be this mess of wrinkles, and take the jewelry off her hands and it's just bony, horrible ugliness. And then they show her what ladies do with men who are conspicuously absent in the story. They're just not, they're barely present at all. And poor Carla sees what we guess is sex, right? And she can't stop vomiting that whole night. She's exhausted from it the next day. She starts
at some point in the story, she sees a man, and she's never seen one before. And as it happens, men are allowed to dress colorfully in this society, and women must wear gray and black. And she's dazzled, doesn't understand it.
And she starts to ask all the wrong questions, which is, why can't I wear color,
Right.
And then she starts writing down the things that, that Madame Westphal said in accordance with her job. And she starts remembering that Madame Westphal said some pretty nutty things over time, that there were these sort of fragmentary memories of, they took the music out of the air, or they killed all the children, or the pretty ones, and we have to remake them in our own image periodically. We have to kill them all and remake the new ones in our own image. Um, and then she mentions a cave at some point where there are radios and some other things, and she doesn't know what that's all about. Uh, and as time goes by, it turns out that all of Madame Westfall's students have the same assignment, and that they have a few of them have mentioned this cave, and it turns out the girls have been lied to, that they're not writing down Madame Westfall's recollections because they're preparing to write some official biography, but because the society suspects something, and that Madame Westphal, who was declining or was getting senile in her old age, had started to whisper about something forbidden towards the end, particularly the cave and this idea of radios and other things. When they move her to the body to Scranton, she is approached. She has a conversation with one of the younger girls, a 10-year-old girl. And Carla's 14. There's a 10-year-old girl named Lisa, and Lisa sort of confesses to Carla that, yes, Madame Westphal said something about a cave, and what should I do about that? And she sort of advises her not to do anything really. She hadn't written that down, but immediately Carla is summoned by Madame Trudeau, who lets it be known that that conversation was somehow completely known to her. So now Carla has learned that in addition to everything that you write disappearing into some void, everything you say is somehow heard. And so she's ordered to punish the young girl, to whip her. And she does so. She feels herself starting to like it, but remembers that thing that Madame Westphal said about how we have to make them in our own image, and holds back just enough. And this gets her in trouble. And while she's getting into trouble, while the sort of muckety mucks are deciding what to do with her, she's trying to eavesdrop and accidentally discovers that the aforementioned cave is actually in Madame Westphal's house, and she slides into it, and inside there she finds all kinds of things. There are boxes full of equipment, but she can also listen to the secret conversations of the rulers of the society, who are these bloodthirsty monsters. And the story sort of ends with all the girls moved into this cave, realizing that they're either going to be eliminated or brainwashed or something like that. But it's a very powerful story about a future where you're not told very much. It's very, very much like Fahrenheit 451, or there was another story called The Guardians. I don't know if you ever read, where there was it was a British kind of dystopian novel about people who live inside the city and outside the city. It's the same thing we were talking about, a two-tiered class. Like there's real people and there's everybody else. And Carla's discovered, she's seen the two-tiered class system, and that is her sin, which turns out to be unforgivable in the end. And I think I don't know how you feel about Walter. I think it's beautifully written, and it's evocative in many of the same ways as all the great sci-fi writers are, but it's different. It's got this unique female perspective to it, which is even scarier in a way. I don't know. What did you think of the story?
So it's very interesting. it's a dystopia that we haven't seen explored very often. It's a matriarchy. You might think at first it resembles something like The Handmaid's Tale, but it's actually the opposite. Women are in control. You know what kind of women? I hate to put it any other way, ugly women. It is a society in which unattractive, older women who, when they're described, are absolutely witch-like. They have long noses,
ropey hair,
long faces, and so on. It's a society run by witches,
and they kill the pretty ones,
which eliminates beauty. Female jealousy, in other words, is the female jealousy and envy, as practiced by the older generation, is the ruling principle of this society. Feminists, you may react with horror because it has none of the orthodox or expected motifs of feminist science fiction, and basically says this is what a world like of so-called Karens would feel like. There's an abhorrence of sex, there's an abhorrence of ornament, an abhorrence of beauty, an abhorrence of sensuality. It is enforced decrepitude, enforced crone likeness, and they don't blame men. There are no men in the story to blame. It doesn't, for once, seem like this dystopian society is the fault of men.
There are men, but they're just retreating goons, basically. Easily manipulated.
It's so refreshing, damn it, to read a story from the 70s about dystopia in which mean men aren't the villains. It's like the worst of some kind of British girls' school, abstracted and amplified to the point where, you can't leave your uniform. And I think at the end, there's sort of a magical transformation that's going on where Carla looks down and literally sees herself turning into this witch, losing her youth, losing her spunk. And I think we're meant to believe that some kind of metamorphosis takes place there.
Does that happen? Let's see.
If you read the very last paragraph.
When the child slept, Carla wrote in the notebooks in the dark, not knowing if she wrote other words or on blank pages. She wrote her life story and then made up other things to say. She wrote her name over and over and wept because she had no last name. She wrote nonsense words and rhymed them with other nonsense words. She wrote of the savages who had laughed at the funeral, and she hoped they wouldn't all die all over the winter months. She thought that probably they would. She wrote of the golden light through green black pine trees and of bird songs and moss underfoot. She wrote of Lisa lying peacefully now at the far end of the cave amid riches neither of them could ever have comprehended. When she could no longer write, she drifted in and out of the golden light in the forest, listening to other bird songs, hearing the raucous laughter that now sounded so beautiful. I don't know. There might be. I might have missed that part.
Well. There's some point at which she looks down at her legs and they're changing or something. But it is a gerontocracy, a matriarchy, and a kind of beauty-phobic society that's just crushing and is basically meant to extract all the romance and fantasy from girlhood and replace it with witchy oppression by mummified old ladies. Huckleberry Finn's nightmare, except as experienced by a girl. It reminded me.
It is a little Huck-like, by the way. Yeah.
Yeah. And it also reminded me of that Ishiguro novel, Never Let Me Go, which
Oh, I never read that.
I thought when I read this might have derived heavily from it. It's about a mysterious boarding school in England where the students don't get old and we don't know why, and then we find out later that you're killed and your organs are harvested at a certain point. It's basically not a school but a farm for healthy young people who then will be chopped up and used to, I don't know, reinvigorate old people. I would bet that Ishiguro read this. I've always wondered where that book came from, and I think this is one of its sources. It's very imaginative, it's brutal, and as I say, it doesn't follow any known political agenda. How strange to be writing about the horror of older women at the peak of that particular wave of feminism in 1973.
I mean, is it really? Is she really trying to make that point though? Because I think to me it's almost exactly what Orwell was writing about. It's the terror of anything that's beautiful or sensual, because that's the biggest threat to a control-based society.
But it's like a fairy tale. It's like Hansel and Gretel. They're trapped in this witch's castle.
That's true.
It happens to be a school, and when they disenchant her about beauty by showing her a movie, a beautiful woman who's all augmented with fake eyelashes, and they rip it all off, and she's horrifying underneath. That is the scene that really stuck with me, because I thought,
Tolstoy could have written that.
Yes, yeah,
right,
yeah. Or Swift. Swift had a whole poem about being revolted by a woman, behind the scenes, who also goes to the bathroom, but is idolized by, some, courtly poet or something. So it's misogynistic as hell, I guess I could put it, but it's female misogyny.
Yeah, I mean, I also interpret it though as this is what a young pretty girl would feel about, because she's also growing up at the time. She's just having her period for the first time, right? And she's going through puberty, and there is there is a moment in for young girls where they realize they become a threat
Right.
to older women, to their friends, right? And that is very
Right.
unsettling. And that I think,
yes, it's the apotheosis of that moment when your body starts to become an object of desire and excitement, but also danger to those
jealousy,
who aren't beautiful and who are older. And that's unexplored territory for me, honestly. I didn't have sisters. I had a very beautiful mom who was still coquettish, in late middle age and right till the day she died, really. But I one predicament that I find really hard to imagine is that of the beautiful young woman. Because from the point of view of the guy who wants attention from the beautiful young woman, they're a combination of intimidating, inscrutable, infuriating, and remote. To find myself empathizing with the panic of impending beauty as a young woman was really a big leap for me. It took me into a quadrant or a segment of the human experience that I hadn't really contemplated.
I mean, she's so afraid. She's so conscious of the threat that her growth poses that she actually tries to prevent it by these crude means that I don't want to get into.
Right.
but
which a lot of adolescent girls do.
yeah, they do. Yeah, absolutely. And see, it's different for boys though. So boys don't go through this. Like, a young boy becoming a man at physically at 14 or 15 is not
Yeah.
really a threat to older men. Like, it's not part of the puberty experience for young men. You don't go through that and suddenly wake up and find that other dudes hate you or feel differently about you, right?
Right.
Which I think
Or
there
your
is some of that.
father.
Or your father, right?
Um,
Yeah. So
I think that one thing that she really does well in the story is the cumulative discovery narration, in which
yes,
not much happens, but you're constantly running ahead trying to fill in the nature of this place. And she's pretty withholding about it. We don't suddenly get a history of how it became this way.
no, it's very suspenseful. I'm sorry, that's something I left out. Is that it's written like somebody who is really good at like potboiler fiction, right? Who knows how to make you turn the page to find out that next thing, and that's a skill that not every writer has. I always thought it was interesting that Nabokov thought the one thing that he liked about Dostoevsky was that Dostoevsky was really good at suspense, right? And some writers have it and some don't. Kate Wilhelm definitely does. You want to find out what's going on in this world.
And I would coin the term expositional suspense rather than dramatic suspense, because though there is more knowledge and she finds out and overhears more at the end that does illuminate the situation, what you're really reading for are details in order to paint a picture. She gives you little brushstrokes and allows you to assemble your portrait of this place. And each brushstroke has a kind of power all its own. At one point, she takes a test. She's asked to take a test, maybe kind of as a form of discipline. So she goes to what they call the learning machine, some computer, and it's a really easy test. It's just a series of true statements. She just has to draw a line instead of filling in the blanks.
Totally predictive of current education, by the way. But go ahead.
Exactly. No wrong answers on that test. Just pure programming, basically. Just a reminder of all the truths that you have to, affirm. And aside from the particular gender makeup of this place, what it really seems to be a story about is a story about the end of change, hostility to change, to growth itself, to learning. To learning. Nobody learns, nobody grows, nobody changes, nobody has anything. They have put people into they've put these girls into a kind of waking sleep, or a kind of paralysis where there is no development.
Does that sound familiar at all?
Well, just like the body that lies there mummified, and she keeps saying, it's a doll. It's not a person, it's a doll. Well, really, it's not heavy-handed, but that is exactly what everybody is in this world. They're all dolls. They don't have inner lives. They don't possess anything. They don't have dynamic, developing, rushing metabolisms. They're all doll-like. They're all mummified spiritually and so on. And we're seeing the last moments, maybe, of this girl's humanity.
Yeah,
Before it's absorbed into the system. It's like a beehive or something.
Or wiped out. Yeah.
Or wiped out. Yeah. I mean, it may be a society kind of based on a beehive because, as you remember, there are only like 6 possible professions or fates that you can choose. I think it's the queen bee has died, and they just. I think even in bee life, they mourn the queen, or they stay near the body for a long time. It could be a pretty extended metaphor about insectile female dystopian possibilities. Because you're not allowed to grow into the queen unless you are the queen.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah. Well, what I thought reading this story is that it felt like kind of a flip side to 1984, and it also felt incredibly prescient and in tune with a lot of the themes that we discuss a lot on this show. The fear of spontaneity, the suppression of knowledge, philosophy, art, all those things are just rapidly disappearing from our society and being replaced by, this kind of never-ending staccato, or hammering of doctrine that's just humorless, right? And this is that world imagined far into the future, and it's actually unfortunately not that hard to imagine, I don't think.
Week by week, month by month, Matt, I'm becoming fixated on the theme of gerontocracy.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Canadian document that we just described
exactly
was really an apology for the old continuing to have something while the young have very little and can only get it if the old pass it on to them. The David Brooks article, that we discussed last week was really an old man saying, how dare you be ungrateful to my generation and my type who have accumulated and done so much. And a lot of the disguised, a lot of the latent messaging behind expert worship and elite worship is, we're talking about old people, okay? Because you don't become an expert until you're older. And in nature, it's very hard. I like I said at the beginning, I observe animals all the time. I used to live on a ranch where you look at antelope herds every day. Once a dominant male emerges in a herd, it's very hard for them to be overthrown, but it is absolutely essential that they be overthrown. The natural revolutionary process in life is not as Marx described it, the worker against the wealthy, but it is the young against the old. Because finally, especially with old here, who, and at the beginning of this, they talk about how the woman was literally propped up in so many ways. She's had all these medications and everything that's managed to keep her alive forever, and and keep lording it over everyone. And that's the first unnatural feature of this story, is how damn old and this woman was, and decrepit, yet still in charge. And in our society, getting past this this layer of old people who've got everything from Viagra to hormone replacement to being able to live in the most salubrious and healthy environments is going to be a problem. And I'm starting to think more and more the secret struggle that we're facing is for the young to take their proper place, to take the resources that they require. Old people telling young people that you don't have, you're not going to have the wherewithal to reproduce. You're not going to be able to live with your own families. You're not going to be able to buy a house. You're going to have to maybe do this intergenerational mortgage and have some big group of roommates and so on. Is really telling you, hey, fuck you. What we had, we sucked up for ourselves, and we either spent it or plan to hoard it, and you're not going to have it. And if I were to start really becoming a radical, I would say we are starving and demoralizing and depressing the young so that they don't come after old people's stuff.
That's exactly what's happening. And the line in the story that really stuck out to me was the one where their solution to youth, the whole problem of natural youthful rebellion, is we have to make them like us, right? We have to recreate them in our own image. And we see that now with young people being given sort of the policing authority, right? Like social and political policing authority as as cancelers, as people who crack down and root out sin and all those other things, whereas they should be making music and comedy and doing all the things that young people traditionally are so great at. Like we don't need 19-year-olds to be cops. We need them to be Elvis, basically, right? Or Chuck Berry or whatever. And they're trying to head that off at the pass by passing down this viciousness and intolerance and
the detail that was not in that policy paper that was in this story was that the old, which were consonant with the elite in this, who have the resources, obviously, if the only way to prosper as a young person is to inherit something, that means that before you inherit, the older people have it. So the real aristocracy does have one thing in common. They are older than average, and worse, they're coveting life extension. For the old to covet life extension is actually an economic resource
injustice,
grab.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
Right. I'm not a eugenicist or somebody who thinks, Logan's Run is a great idea, that they should all, go happily off, into the suicide chamber. But at the same time, we don't have a mechanism for the pre-death transfer of wealth from the old to the young. All we see on TV is buy gold, you old codger, hoard your stuff, do a reverse mortgage, sell your life insurance. Hey, man, your life insurance is meant for the beneficiary, but you're going to sell it so what? You can party a little longer? And it may be that we have come into a social deformity that we're not naming or facing squarely, and we're politicizing a lot of its tertiary and secondary effects without going like, hey, the old people have all the stuff, they have all the wealth, they took it all, they're spending it, and they're demanding things that put young people in debt. And this is not just disgraceful, but a terrible distortion of the life cycle. And what's the answer? Stop the life cycle. Like, you young people now, please stop making more of yourselves. Like, right. You're bad enough. You're demanding enough. You want houses and so on and real jobs and a future. But for God's sake, don't create more of yourselves.
Yeah, and that's why I can't stand this. It makes me sad to hear young people talking about how, well, I can't afford to bring a child to this world, because they've been successfully propagandized by people who are trying to make them feel guilty about wanting natural things.
But we're told that the great conflicts in society, all gender versus gender, race versus race, religion versus religion. But what about old versus young? Because in nature, where I look around at animals that exist in herds, that is the prime driver of social order and the great conflict. Because at some point, you have to depose the oldies.
Yep. And in this story, they're trying to suppress the one great truth, right? What did Oscar Wilde say? That youth is the only thing worth having. And in this story, they're trying to say that what's important is everything but that, and it can't succeed, right? So anyway,
the youth have one resource that the old don't, and that's fertility, and they're trying to talk them out of exploiting it.
Exactly. Anyway, great story. Highly recommend it. And hopefully, I mean, I'm gonna read more. Like I read more Bartleby, I'm gonna read more Wilhelm now. So can't wait. But Walter, thanks for hanging out this week, and I'll see you on the other side.